April 12th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. It's nice to be back here in person and actually have a quorum. We have one committee report and 8 discussion items today, so buckle up. We're going to have to stay focused to make sure we can get it through the agenda. I believe we may have a hard stop. We may lose a quorum a couple minutes after 12 today. So we're going to have to adjust accordingly. If we do not get to items on the agenda, we'll push them to a future agenda. We start every meeting with an opportunity for the public to comment on an item not contained on the agenda. Are there any members of the public who would wish to speak on an item that is not on the agenda today? Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to move on to committee report. Special Committee Planning Commission Rules of Procedure being reported out from committee. Mr. Crane, do you have an update?
I do. Thank you very much and good morning. So this item was a follow-up from your annual retreat last year where we identified some enhancements to your bylaws, the rules of procedure. And these rules of procedure have not been updated since 2017. And what staff did was take a first attempt at updating the bylaws and identified a few areas of enhancement. So primarily it was intended to update in accordance with state law, since there was a significant amount of change to the 160D statutes that govern what it is that we do. We also took this opportunity to clarify the roles of the chairperson and the vice chairperson, clarify language related to public comment and when we receive public comment and how that's done. But the biggest change here is the removal of the secretary position. So that has traditionally been a position of the Planning Commission. And the way that the rules of procedure previously read was that the secretary would keep all the minutes and the records of the commission. Well, that's staff's jobs, and we've traditionally been playing that role for you. So we took this opportunity to remove the secretary position from these rules. If it's acceptable to this body, an appropriate action would be to recommend approval of this, and they would be forwarded on to the city council, and they could adopt these rules, and then you can start using them. Happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Seeing none. Just to verify, Travis, you just need motion and adoption or approval? Okay.
Just motion for approval.
Got it.
I'll motion to approve the Planning Commission Rules of Procedure.
And do we have a second? And great. We have Commissioner Mann offered a motion, and Commissioner Raines offered a second to approve the Special Committee Planning Commission Rules of Procedure. And we can just do show of hands at this point. By show of hands, those in favor? Any opposed? No, the motion passes unanimously. Moving on to old business. We have rezoning case number Z7621 located at 12117 Strickland Road. This item has been previously discussed, and we have received presentations and heard from the public. So we will begin with a short update from staff focusing on the revisions to the request. Good morning, Hannah.
Good morning, Hannah Reckow, Planning and Development. The applicant has submitted revised zoning conditions. New are an addition to condition 4, specifying that vehicle parking in addition to buildings is not permitted within the 150 feet setback from the southern property boundary. And then 2 new conditions have been added. One offers a cap on residential units on the property, so that's 89 units maximum. And then the other specifies plantings that would happen along Strickland Road. Refers to a type C2 protective yard in the UDO that would need to be installed along Strickland Road. So the condition on number of residential units obviously changes the maximum build out to a maximum of 89 units. And then the consistency analysis did not change with the change in conditions. So just as a reminder, the request is inconsistent with the institutional designation on the future land use map. There's no urban form guidance for the site, and then the request is consistent overall with the comprehensive plan. And as a reminder, these are the consistent policies touching on compact development, housing variety, and increasing the total number of permitted units. And then inconsistent policies, our future land use map consistency, and then sort of massing and scale of infill the surrounding area. And your deadline for action is in May, and one regularly scheduled meeting will happen before that deadline. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Opening up for questions or comments from commissioners. I'll start out. We had a number of emails regarding erosion mitigation. I was wondering if staff could respond to that. If there's a requirement, what's currently in the code related to erosion mitigation, or erosion mitigation during construction specifically.
Sure. It's my understanding, and I can have maybe Travis correct me if I'm wrong, that there is a requirement for developers to show how they will manage erosion, to I think, submit a plan when they're at the site plan and construction stage.
That's correct. So there are rules and regulations for controlling on-site drainage during construction and post-construction. Those are done through two different methods, and we'd be happy to expand upon that.
Excellent, thank you. Are there any additional questions or comments from commissioners? Commissioner Bennett?
Thank you. One of the emails we received referenced a previous rezoning attempt for this parcel, and noted that the site plan was ultimately denied, and a comment was made that the parcel was unbuildable until a gravity line is extended from Evans Mills subdivision. Has this been done, or is this something that needs to be done prior to rezoning, or is it something that would happen after rezoning?
In you referencing connection to utilities?
Yes.
So no, applicants do not need to submit a site plan in order to rezone. They can come forward with just the request for a particular zoning district. During, in the staff report, there is comment from a whole host of trades, including Raleigh Water, and they note that there isn't currently a connection for, I think it's sewer on the site, but we didn't get any indication that connection was not possible.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions or comments?
I have a question. It looks like this parcel is kind of unique in that it's institutional because it's adjoining a church lot. But if I don't know if you can go back, I think it's slide number 5, right? Whereas the future land use map, if the parcel was to be consistent with the adjoining parcels as far as future land use, I don't know that I'm articulating this question very, very, very well, but how many units would be allowed if it was moderate density or one of the other uses that are adjacent?
So approval of this request, because it is inconsistent with the future land use map, would be a de facto amendment to the future land use map to medium density. That's the sort of least intensive designation that the current request would be consistent with. Moderate density, the current description in the future land use map indicates that an RX 3 or 4 could be consistent if there is conditions that specify massing or a maximum number of units per building. So that's sort of the missing piece in the request that would amend it to moderate density, moderate scale residential, sorry.
Following up on Commissioner Alder's question, the original rationale behind that being institutional was likely because it was one parcel under one ownership, is that accurate?
Probably not, and I'll admit I'm testing my memory here.
Yeah.
Going back to 2009 when this was adopted. It's likely that the church property directly adjacent set the stage for institution on this property. Just seeing that it's vacant now, and staff could see an expansion of that type of use. And I want to take one half step backwards and provide a little bit more context for Commissioner Elder's question. So under the moderate intensity land use category, we don't regulate or we don't speak to density controls. It's strictly height. So under that type of land use category, it would be 3-story construction.
Thank you for that, Mr. Crane. Are there any additional questions or comments from commissioners? Commissioner Bennett?
Thank you. Were the new conditions that we see today worked out with the community? I think one of our, I guess, hopes when we deferred this before was that there would be some more discussion with the neighbors and some compromise worked out. And we received a lot of emails about meetings or the lack of meetings. And so I'd just like to hear a little bit more about what happened between the applicant and the community between our last meeting and today.
Sure. So my understanding of the timeline since March 8th is that the applicant met with the neighbors last Thursday. I was at that meeting as well, and that these conditions were submitted prior to that meeting. And I don't know if...
Okay. So there's been no, I guess, feedback from the neighbors to the applicant about the conditions because they didn't see the conditions prior to them being submitted to the city.
That may... I don't know if the applicant is here. That may be...
Can the applicant answer that, Chair Fox?
Let me just do a quick check. How many people in the audience are here for Z7621? There we go. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Crane, if we open up for applicant discussion, are we opening up for additional public comment as well?
That's right. So it would be appropriate for the commission to identify how much time you'd like to give for each side to speak.
Would we like to do an additional just 5-6 minutes? Does that seem appropriate? Okay, by show of hands, motion to allow additional applicant and those in opposition to speak for 6 minutes.
Total or
Each side.
each side?
Each side. Okay. All right. If the applicant's available to answer some questions. Okay. And then members of the public, I know there are a number of you. If you have an additional 6 minutes to speak and you want to provide a spokesperson to do so, now might be an appropriate time to figure out who that person is.
Thank you, Chair Fox. Randy Herman, attorney from the law firm of B.A. Folk, here representing the applicant. The developer is also present if we need him for any particular questions. So to answer the question that was asked, we had, as Hannah said, we had a neighborhood meeting with the neighbors last Thursday. Prior to that, we prepared these amended conditions based on the comments that we received from the neighbors and from the commission at the prior planning commission meeting. So to accommodate those requests and those questions that we had at that prior meeting, specifically there was the question about, we had the condition about no buildings within 150 feet. There was a question about whether that also prevented other portions of the development from being in that area, so we amended the condition to also specify no buildings and no parking areas. We probably will have to put a stormwater control pond in that area because it is the lowest, topographically the lowest part of the property, so the water flows down to there, but there won't be any structures within that area, so that provides a significant buffer from the southern portion of the property. We had questions about the number of units. There was concerns about the fact that there wasn't a max under the RX zoning designation. There's no inherent maximum number of units, and so there was some concern about that. Staff had calculated the total number of units that could be on the property at 102, and so we considered there's no way we can actually get to 102, and so we came up to a maximum that we thought was reasonable, which is 89. We may still not be able to get to 89, but it's certainly lower even at that max than what staff calculated the total number of units could be. And then there was concerns about the view of the front of the buildings from Strickland Road, concern that the buildings might go pretty much all the way up to Strickland Road. So we looked at that and decided the best way to address that concern was to use the protective yard language that's already in the UDO. So we looked at a C2 protective yard, which is a planted buffer with bushes and trees. There's specific detailed conditions for how that works in the UDO, and so we figured borrowing that language was just the easiest way, rather than trying to write new language for a protective buffer. The main concern that the neighbors still have, which we have heard but we aren't really able to do anything about, is the height of the buildings. So our calculations for the property have determined that the only way to make the project work is to go to a 4-story building. Because the property is significantly restricted. There's a stream buffer, a 50-foot stream buffer along the east side of the property. There's this 150-foot buffer that we've incorporated along the southern portion. And that just doesn't, it's not a large property to begin with. It leaves less than 2 acres of developable property. And so in order to make the project work, we've determined that we need to go up to 4 stories in order to accommodate that. And we understand the neighbors don't like that, but there's only so much you can compromise when you need to be able to get that building on the property in order to work. So we have attempted to address their concerns by adding these buffers, by screening the property, by putting a cap on the number of units, but we're unable to accommodate their request to go to 3 stories. And that just is where we are with them. So we've had, prior to the Planning Commission meeting, we had 3 neighborhood meetings with the neighbors. We've now had an additional one with them. And, as I said, we've heard their concerns. We're doing our best to address their concerns. And there are some concerns we just can't do anything about. And the other primary concern, as far as we can tell from the neighborhoods, from the neighbors, is that they just don't want apartments here. They just don't want to live near apartments. And that's not something that we are able to address, or that we think is necessarily a legitimate concern. I mean, they've basically said to us that they believe that putting in apartments will increase crime, that apartment dwellers are more likely to be criminals, and we don't have anything we can do about that. So that's where we are with the neighbors, and as I said, we've attempted to address their concerns with the conditions that we've added.
Thank you for your comments. Members of the public, is there a spokesperson who'd like to speak?
My name is Steve Lai. I live at 3617 Charterhouse Drive, have been there 43 years. These are my neighbors who are here today. They represent a fraction of the 50 or more people that have been involved in discussions with our friends who wish to rezone this property. I showed many of these slides a week ago. Let's see if we can get down to the key issues. We recognize that he has put a cap that reduces the density of development on this property to R22. Development on this property to R22. But it remains a fact that this property is really limited to 2.5 acres, and that means that the buildings will be very much crowded up near the front. At the last meeting in the discussion at the table, Mr. Herman stated that I had been untruthful about the height of the buildings, so I wish to address that here today in case I misspoke. But the key point in the center of this chart is that this 68-foot building opportunity is far, far, far and away much greater, more intense, more tall, and frankly, more ugly than anything in our neighborhood today. We've talked about a lot of other things with Mr. Herman and company. We've talked about the fence, the buffer, the need for on-site management. There are no commitments here, and every time we met last week, we tried to open up discussion on a number of topics, but in fact, we're always limited to we can't commit. We talked about the sewer access earlier. That, in my mind, is a requirement of the comprehensive plan. The city has to contribute to this property which is outside of its jurisdiction. It may be annexed if it's developed, but at this point there is no plan, no commitment for access to the city sewer system. We've talked with Mr. Herman at great length about flooding and erosion control. You notice he hasn't mentioned that anywhere in his conditions. And we continue to work with the city of Raleigh, which is studying the source of flooding and erosion in Hairsnipe Creek in our neighborhood, which incidentally flows right by my house. What is planned here? He assures us there will be no more runoff, but in fact we all know that there will be a greater increase in the volume and intensity of runoff in spite of detention requirements. This is a summary of the timeline. Indeed, we've gone from 40 to 89 units in the discussion with our friends. Quite frankly, he lost a lot of support from the neighbors when we went from R10 to RX4. That is where, we basically have reached an impasse, and without some outside party to help us arbitrate a solution like tapering or reducing the height of some of the buildings, we just didn't make any progress Thursday night. In fact, he had already filed his final amended conditions that you have before you today. They had been filed about a week before we met. We have made, we have made suggestions. We started out suggesting that to be compatible, these apartments should be similar to what is already there at the lofts. My chart shows what the law says, and that is that the buildings along the street of the lofts are limited by ordinance to 35 feet. Buildings toward the back near Cambridge neighborhood are tapered to 32 feet and separated by a 50-foot undisturbed border between the nearest building and the fence. Thursday night, we saw again this same site plan that we've seen at 3 consecutive meetings with the developer. My math, which I've measured from IMAPs, shows that he's looking for a total footprint of 36,000 square feet, a total floor space of 145, and probable yield after you take out common areas, amenities, etc., of 109,000 square feet, or 1,228 square feet per unit. In spite of this generous allocation, he's still searching for more parking space, and hence the red arrow which he announced that the stormwater detention pond will now move down to the back of the property in the, quote, 150-foot no-build zone. But in fact, now that becomes a no-tree zone as well. This may be the chart that he wished to challenge, and that was the setbacks. Notice the RX4 street yard that will exist after the road is widened will only be 14 feet. That is where he will have his 15-foot C2 buffer. Bottom line, and I know I'm running out of time, I showed this building, which is one that this company has developed This is approximately 30 feet from the existing two-lane road. So here you just have to imagine what happens when the city or the state comes in and widens that road. Chair, may I have 1 minute?
We will have to vote. I'll let you finish your sentence.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to finish my recommendation. Okay. Last chart.
Okay. By show of hands, those in support of allowing Mr. Lai to continue? Yep, for 1 minute. Okay. All right, go ahead.
Thank you. Bottom line, we have
Apologies.
Bottom line, we have tried to work with Mr. Herman and Mr. Phillips. We have, as you noted, had 4 meetings. We have submitted to them and to the Planning Commission back in January well-written legal language that we thought would be similar to that of the existing apartments and adequate to protect the development of the new apartments that are proposed. But as we've mentioned, we are pretty much hung up on the issue of height and the issue of borders. For the sake of the apartments who are not well represented in our group today, this proposed zoning district would allow these 6-story buildings to be built 0 feet from the lot line. The existing apartments are set back 30 feet from that line. We just don't have consistency in what is proposed here.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Lai.
Thank you.
Point of clarification, maybe for staff, maybe Travis, if you want to answer this. 0-foot setback on apartment buildings, is that an accurate statement?
In the RX district, there is an allowance to build a side yard setback of 0 or 6 feet, one of the two, depending on how you construct.
Pulling back to the table, are there any additional questions or comments from commissioners?
Have one question. One of the conditions mentions a 30-foot distance from the edge of pavement, I believe, to the building. I assume that's maybe just a matter of clarification. Is that the existing pavement or some distance off the center line of the right-of-way? Like, how is that defined?
I believe that would be the existing paved edge of the street.
Any, Commissioner Bennett?
So just a follow-up, I guess, to Commissioner Dautel's question. So if it's from the existing edge, when the road is widened, then it will be much closer, right?
If I can comment on that, the reason we phrase that condition that way is because we know that there is an intent to widen Strickland Road at some point. We're not sure where exactly that's going to happen in the development process. So at the point that the property is developed, whatever the edge of the pavement is at that time, that's where it'll be set. So if the road happens to be widened between now and when we actually begin development, then it'll be 30-foot setback from where the road is at that time.
Question for Mr. Myers, actually. Do you know when the timeline would be of the widening of Strickland in that section?
So there's no program project to do that by the city or the state, but I think that the most likely outcome is that the development of this lot would be responsible for making those frontage improvements, and that their frontage would be widened to the extent that that's safe. And you can see the exact same thing happen opposite this site on Strickland Road where the school was built more recently. And if you look at the aerial photos in 2021, you can kind of see that new streetscape with the sidewalk and the curb and gutter in the eventual location. So I imagine that's what would happen in this site as well.
So per standard site plan development, you're required to develop like half of the right-of-way to the new street
Exactly.
section? Okay.
Yes. Now, it gets a little bit more complicated in the sense that there's times where it's not safe to do that because you create a situation where people are likely to run off the road in the ditch, and we don't build those. And I would have said or pay a fee in lieu, but usually to widen a 2-lane road into a 4-lane road for a small site, that's not a proportional requirement. So that widening, if it's possible, on a technical basis, is actually something the developer can be reimbursed for through a reimbursement contract, because it's their obligation, but it's really the city and the state's, I guess, responsibility from a proportional impact standpoint.
So point of clarification, if a site plan comes in and the curb is at, let's say, 0, it would be required per the site plan to move it 15 feet, right? Does that become the distance of which the measurement of the 30-foot per the condition is measured from, or the condition at the start of the site plan process?
That's not a question I answer. Maybe Hannah or Travis or Bynum can.
Chicken and egg question.
Can you ask that again, please?
Yeah, so the way the condition is worded, it's at the time of site plan, I believe. But if the act of doing the site plan is the thing that is moving the curb, where does the curb sit in relationship to the building?
Well, and I think the condition is a little bit more vague than that. It just references the edge of the pavement, right? So it doesn't say existing pavement. It doesn't say existing as of time of site plan. It just says edge of pavement. So you could read that to mean that there shall forever and always be a 30-foot setback from the edge of pavement, wherever that may be.
Okay. That was my read. Okay.
At the time of site plan, they'll have to show compliance with the zoning conditions, and they'll also have to show compliance with the rest of the UDO. If that means widening the road, then they would have to show compliance with the widened condition,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
That was my read of it. I just wanted to make sure that was accurate. I'm just checking for.
There's no firm commitment to widen Strickland now, correct?
No, but at the time of site plan, they would be required to build 50% of the right-of-way for the improvements, so they themselves will be the act that moves.
Chair Fox, can you two talk in your mic so we can hear
Sorry,
you?
apologies. So at the time of site plan, the applicant is required to build 50% of the improvements, or for the half of the right-way, or half of the right-of-way, or pay a fee in lieu, per what Mr. Myers was speaking of. So the act of putting in the site plan is the thing that moves the curb or moves the edge of the pavement, versus waiting for a streetscape project for the widening of Strickland Road. Does that make sense? Which could still happen, but is not currently, as we understand, in the CIP. All right. Go ahead.
Sorry, so if they choose to pay a fee in lieu, does that change that timing there? If they choose to pay a fee in lieu, then they're not actually doing the improvements, which would change the pavement width, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
May I, Chair Fox? In
Go right
general,
ahead, Mr.
there's no choice to pay a fee in lieu. It's kind of, an applicant can ask to pay a fee in lieu,
Okay.
and there's times when they're told to pay a fee in lieu because that it's not safe or appropriate or possible to make improvements, but it's not necessarily the applicant's choice to elect whether they do a fee in lieu or not.
Thank you.
There, thank you. Additional questions or comments, Commissioner Bennett?
So my last comment is that my primary concern about this is actually not so much the street, but the infill compatibility. I'm completely in support of infill development. I'm completely in support of increasing density throughout the city to allow people to live in maybe in areas that they haven't been able to live in. But I do think as we do that, we have to be thoughtful about the development that's already there. And when we're looking at if it's reasonable and in the public interest, I've stated before, I try to be sensitive to the existing communities. And I don't have a problem with this development necessarily, but I am concerned that it's not compatible with what's there already. I'm very familiar with this area. As I mentioned before, I drive Strickland almost daily. And you know, I've been paying attention as I drive by there, and the apartments that are currently there, you really can hardly see them. I mean, they kind of blend in with what's there, and this seems like it's going to really stick out. And it just seems incompatible with anything else along the road there. And so that's my primary concern. While we're promoting infill development and missing middle housing, and I just think it needs to be thoughtful and it needs to respect what's already there. Otherwise, we're going to get this haphazard looking development that we see in some cities where there's no zoning at all. And I don't think that's what we're going for here. Also, it seems to me that where we want to increase densities, we want to also have transit, because one of our priorities is also to reduce vehicle miles traveled. There's no transit that I'm aware of along this portion of Strickland Road. I'm not aware of any plans to bring transit. So if we're adding, let's say, the maximum 89 units, that's just going to be cars on Strickland and Ray and those surrounding roads, because there's no transit to take people where they need to go. So I just think we need to be thoughtful when we're seeing vacant parcels and we go, oh, infill is great. We need to think about, is it really? Are we just increasing trips? And is it compatible with what's already there? And so for me, those are my two concerns. And so I don't think I'm going to support this for those two reasons.
Thank you for your comments. Go ahead, Commissioner Lampman.
I'll just make one quick comment that I think that this area is likely to see a lot more of this type of development in the sense of the elementary school that just recently opened there. And I am in favor of multifamily product being delivered nearby school systems where there's, you know, it provides an opportunity for access to schools. And then also I like that it's pretty much within walking distance of the grocery store. I think that is very supportive to folks who can't afford to buy homes, to live in apartment communities that have this level of walkability. So I will be in support of it.
Thank you for your comments. Any additional questions or comments from commissioners? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion. As we frantically open our consistency statement. I believe I saw a hand from Commissioner Raines.
Thanks, Chair Fox. I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated April 12th, 2022, containing the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment. This recommendation also includes an amendment to the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement. This action taken is reasonable and in the public interest because the request would increase the number of housing units and types of housing permitted on the site, support the relative affordability of the new units.
Thank you. Commissioner Raines has offered a motion to approve Z 7621. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Lampman. Is there any additional discussion or debate on the merits of the motion? Seeing none, by show of hands, those in favor of approving Z 7621? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those opposed? Motion passes 5-3. Moving on to new business. These requests have not appeared on a previous Planning Commission agenda, and we will hear a full staff presentation and an applicant presentation. Item E.1 is rezoning case Z7121. And we will start out with a presentation from Mr. Mabel.
Good morning, Ira Mabel, Planning and Development. keeping your head on Strickland Road, I think, for the next case. This is 13120 Strickland Road for just over 16 acres. Currently zoned R1 with the Falls Watershed Protection Overlay District and the Special Highway Overlay District 1 to R4 CU with the same overlays. Excuse me. Zoning in this area is actually a bit mixed. So the Strickland Road is generally the border where the Falls Watershed Protection Overlay District starts. So land north of there in the little raindrops is the FWPOD, and most of that is zoned low-density residential. But for this corner of Strickland and Leesville, and then going south on Leesville, you're outside the overlay. So zoning is a bit different. This is a aerial for some more orientation. So there's 540 running across the north of the top of the slide. That Harris Teeter's shopping center is directly adjacent to the site to the west. And then I've labeled the Winbrook subdivision, which is mentioned in the staff report, I believe. I've had some email correspondence from residents of there. There are 4 conditions currently on the case. The first is a hard cap of 20 dwelling units. The second is basically prohibiting everything but detached homes. And then the other 2 are related to properties bordering the site. So these ones on Springdale, effectively. And it's very nice to have the touchscreen back post-Zoom. So specifying a principal building setback and then a protective yard that's defined in the UDO as a certain protective yard. So the change in entitlement here from an estimated 10-ish units to the hard cap of 20. That 10 comes from the Falls Watershed overlay requires 40% of the site be trees. So in both cases, there's 40% off the top that's not available for development. The transportation's a little mixed, mostly negative, because as mentioned before, there isn't really transit on Strickland, and there's not really plans for there to be. The affordability analysis also sort of mixed. It would add to the housing supply marginally, as shown. And the demographics, very typical for land up here near the outer belt line, has been mostly rural and lower on all the EJ screen demographic indices. Request is consistent with the future land use map, which shows rural residential here. So recommending 1 unit per acre. Again, the request is slightly above that. The SHOD covers the urban 4 map, which is basically requires forestation or a buffer yard adjacent to 540 right away, and consistent with the comprehensive plan overall. So I'll skip to the Falls Lake. There is an area plan for Falls Lake, so consistent with all of those policies. It's appropriate. There were 2 outstanding issues. One is just some basically typo fixes as the case has evolved, just to clean up the zoning conditions. And then the second one, as I'm sure we'll talk about in greater length during the discussion period, this case is not exempted from block perimeter today, which is something you can do via zoning condition. That is currently not in the case. So that is something that will be determined at the time of site plan. But the applicant has expressed in public that they think they will qualify for an exemption and are not planning to connect. So given that has been publicly stated in multiple meetings, staff's preference would be that there is some alternative mode to connect to Strickland, so a bike pedestrian path. Not strictly required of them, but from transportation's point of view, would be a better solution than having nothing at all, no means of connection for any mode of travel. And your deadline is in June, so you have a little bit of runway on this one. Happy to answer any questions before you hear from everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Mabel. Next, we'll hear from the applicant team. The applicant and those in favor have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning, Chair Fox and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Worth Mills with Longleaf Law Partners, representing the rezoning applicant. I'm joined by Bill Turner with the applicant team, as well as Emily Rothrock with ESP Associates, who has worked extensively on the potential site layout for this rezoning case. So the rezoning that we are requesting is to facilitate, as Ira mentioned, a 20-unit single-family neighborhood on a 16.25 acre parcel adjacent to one shopping center, the Harris Teeter Shopping Center, and across Strickland Road from another. The conditions that we have offered to date limit development to 20 single-family homes and provide additional buffering and setbacks from the adjacent single-family homes, both along Springdale and those within Winbrook to the north. Those conditions have made this case consistent with the comprehensive plan, future land use map, and all applicable Falls watershed policies. As Ira mentioned, we are still evaluating whether we can add a condition to address that pedestrian connectivity. There's some significant grading on the site, and we are also working to determine how that pedestrian path would affect our forestation requirements. And so today we certainly welcome any additional feedback that you may have, but we are requesting that this case be deferred to the May 10th Planning Commission date, which will give us a little bit more time to continue to work with the planning staff, Parks and Rec, Transportation departments, and by that time come back to you with what we feel will be a significant upgrade to the case. So again, the site is 16.25 acres. It's located south of I-540, north of Strickland Road. The Harris Teeter Shopping Center is just to our west, with the Springdale Drive neighborhood and the Winbrook community bordering us to the east. Just to give you a sense of the topography on the site, and part of the reason why we are looking to not make a connection to Strickland Road, at least a vehicular connection, is because of the substantial fall off in grade from Strickland Road towards the interior of the site. And you can see here, it's a little difficult to see, but there is a stream that comes through here. And so trying to limit the amount of impacts that we would have to any of the environmental features on our site. We do think that a pedestrian path that leads, towards the Harris Teeter Shopping Center does give residents both of this community and of the Winbrook community an alternative means to get to that shopping center, which has, a grocery store, a bank, doctor's offices, a lot of things that people would go to on a day-to-day without having to get into their car. As Ira mentioned, the site is currently zoned R1 with the Falls watershed and the SHOD 1 overlay. We think that rezoning this to R4 while limiting it to 20 single-family units is a good land use transition from the CX3 zone property that is the Harris Teeter Shopping Center. And as Ira mentioned, this case is consistent with the future land use map, which designates this property as rural residential. There is some mixed use uses and future land use map designations at the intersection of Strickland and Leesville Road. This is a concept plan that we have currently. This does not show the pedestrian path, although again we are working to create a condition that addresses that. So in this concept plan, we are showing 19 single-family homes with the SHOD 1 overlay in that northwest portion of the site where we are abutting I-540, showing stormwater control ponds on both the north and south sites as they would drain into those water features. And then here, again, these are just some preliminary sketches that Emily and her team have prepared, showing some potential routing of that pedestrian path to Strickland Road and to the shopping center. We've been working with the Transportation Department's Parks and Rec Department and Planning Department on accessibility, grading. Can we create a path that does match the recommended grades of the Raleigh Greenway Design Guidelines and the ADA accessibility requirements? Just some additional boundaries here, although I will say After speaking with those departments, this is looking like it might be the most preferred route, both from accessibility standpoint and a connectivity standpoint to those commercial uses to our west. So again, the case is currently consistent with the future land use map, the urban form map, the falls watershed policies identified in the small area plan. Again, we are recommending that we table this case to May 10th to allow for more time. But again, welcome any feedback or questions that you have at this time. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public here to speak in opposition to this case?
They should both be open, so. That'll show up if you move it.
Right. Cool. Thank you.
Good morning, members of the commission. My name is Dan Strong. I'm from the law firm T. Campbell. I'm here on behalf of the Winbrook Homeowners Association. Appreciate Mr. Worth's comments, and we would actually agree with the recommendation to defer this to the May 10th meeting, as there's been a proposal for additional conditions to be added to the application, which may alleviate at least a portion of the homeowners association's concerns with the application. The homeowners association has two primary concerns, the first being connectivity and the addition of traffic to the site. As you see with the there we go. With the proposal that was presented by Mr. Worth and the developers, that the addition of the property will come from Saxon Way, which is the current Winbrook, where the Winbrook community ends on the eastern side of the property, Saxon Way being a rather narrow dead-end road that ends at the property line currently. The proposed development would extend Saxon Way into two separate cul-de-sacs. The Winbrook community is 98 homes, and this development would add up to an additional 20 homes onto the Winbrook community. And the community has a significant concern with adding 20% of the traffic from the community flowing through the single point of Saxon Way out to the one opening that is present for Winbrook. And so the addition of 20 homes is going to pose a significant traffic concern for the residents along Saxon Way, but also the residents along the main thoroughfare through the Winbrook community. In addition, the extension of Saxon Way into two dead-end cul-de-sacs increases Saxon Way itself being already in excess of the maximum dead-end length that's permitted. This would extend Saxon Way to become an even longer dead-end road. The residents, again, the primary concern being connectivity and traffic. In 2006, there was actually a development that was proposed that would allow a connection to Strickland Road, and this is really one of the conditions that the residents of Winbrook Community Association or Homeowners Association would like to have added to the zoning application, and unless a condition of a connection to Strickland Road is added, the residents will oppose the application. The other point that the residents have an issue with in the application is stormwater management, and the new parcels tie into Winbrook Homeowners Association's stormwater controls, as the residents themselves and the Homeowners Association pay for the stormwater control in their community. So I believe one of the conditions that the applicant has proposed is to remedy or to propose an alternative stormwater control system. And so we'd welcome that condition being added. But at this time, we would agree with the proposal to defer to May 10th to see what additional conditions are added to the application.
Thank you for your comments. There are any additional members of the public here to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, I'll open up for questions or comments from commissioners. I'll start out, I'm wondering if Mr. Myers is still here, can clarify the maximum dead end length, if that is still in reference to a dead end when there's a turnaround or a cul-de-sac available.
I'm gonna steal the applicants, or the oppositions. I'm gonna try to. There we go, sorry. This is not a part of my direct responsibility, so I am 99% sure of this, but I believe that the maximum dead end length would be measured from this point in both directions. I believe this is less than 1,000. Right now, it's approximately 1,000 from there to the next nearest street. If you were to kind of take that interpretation of from additional points, it goes all the way to Strickland Road, if I'm not mistaken, or most of the way. There is still an issue. This site plan previously, it does some things from our comp plans connectivity goals, which is positive. There are also other goals in the comp plan in terms of stormwater and impervious surface and tree cover and other things that might lead to this sort of design. So I don't want to speak against connectivity, but to answer your question, the maximum dead end length, I'm 99% sure, is from a turnaround point, which would be at that intersection.
Thank you. And just to clarify, that would be addressed during site plan review, and were they not meeting those minimums, some alternate means of compliance would need to be developed.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, and certainly one of the area issues that Saxonway currently has is there's no turnaround at the end of it, or at least not any formal one, and so construction of a cul-de-sac or a T-turnaround is always a goal.
Thank you. Questions or comments from commissioners? Go ahead, Commissioner O'Haver.
Thanks, Chair Fox. A couple of things. Am I clear in understanding that block perimeter is currently required? And one of the things the applicant is contemplating is adding a condition to eliminate block perimeter if they don't meet the, I think one of the ways to get around block perimeter is severe grading, right? So I guess that's how they're anticipating that maybe they don't need block perimeter, but if they don't qualify for that exemption was the word I was looking for, the intent is to come back with a condition to eliminate block perimeter. Is that correct? Did I understand that?
Is the applicant available?
Thank you for your question. We do not have any intentions to come back with a condition that would exempt ourselves from block perimeter. We've done some fairly extensive, review of the code, and we think that there's at least one code exemption that we meet by right. So that's our plan.
Thanks. And the reason I ask, because I know the commission has had discussions around approving conditions that go against the code. So and with the new requirements that you get one bite at the apple, I wanted to make sure we were clear on that. So thank you, Mr. Mills.
Any additional questions? Go ahead, Commissioner Raines, and then Commissioner Bennett.
Thanks, Chair Fox. Quick question. I know this is probably going against all recommended traffic guidance, but has the applicant looked or studied at connecting to the existing commercial property with a vehicular access, or is that feasible by grade? Or
so I can maybe pull up that previous topo map. Let's see. So part of the issue we have here, not only with the topography from this site to the shopping center, is a retaining wall that goes pretty much all the way of the length here until you get to the Wells Fargo Bank, which are these two parcels there. And so that was something that I discussed with Jason Myers early in the rezoning process, but based on the way that site is currently designed, plus the topography, it didn't seem like it was really any more feasible than the Strickland Road connection, in our opinion.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Commissioner Bennett?
Thank you. My question is for Jason as well, if he's still here. I understand the concerns about connecting to Saxon, but is it, from an operational standpoint, feasible or desirable to have a connection to Strickland between the intersection at the two shopping centers and then Springdale Drive? It seems pretty close.
Yeah, that's a good question. So right now we've got a kind of an intersection there and an intersection here. It's about 900 feet between the two. On a major street like this, a driveway spacing standard would be 300 feet. So that puts a driveway being potentially kind of right there, and that would meet driveway spacing standards. Now, that to me is not necessarily an issue, and I think meets our access management policies in the comprehensive plan. So I think the issue about connecting to Strickland is really the applicant's point of view about on-site impacts and trade-offs and things. And you know, you can see the grade. It is certainly a challenging site.
Okay, thank you.
Along those lines, will there, if it's okay, would it require a sidewalk as well if that were to be the case, a connection there?
If there were a street, yes, any public street's going to have a sidewalk. There is a requirement to make frontage improvements along Strickland, regardless of whether or not they connect to it or not, and provide, if not the actual improvements, then at least the slope easements and the right-of-way and the fees in lieu to make those things. I think that from my goal would be to make those connections because we're right next to a destination, and even if the sidewalk doesn't continue at this moment, it makes it safer for people.
Right.
So yeah, that is a part of their site plan obligations for a subdivision.
Are there accessibility conditions that need to be met on a sidewalk that's alongside a road? I mean, that's going to be a steep road, and I think the sidewalk or the trail that they're proposing had a switchback. My guess is to support the grading there.
If a neighborhood street or some sort of local street were built like that older, proposal, and I don't no idea if that was reviewed, if it was approvable, if it was feasible. I have no knowledge of the history of that. But if there was a street built along that alignment, we have a maximum gradient for a different street type in our street design manual, and the street would have to meet that or go through a design alternate process. The sidewalk along that is very likely to exceed what would be a ProWag ADA standard, which I think is a goal of 5%. And I think that the discussions that Mr. Mills was referencing were about parks in the Greenway standard, which tends to match that 5%. If we build a street in a rolling topography, sometimes the street's steeper than we want a sidewalk to be, and that's allowable under ADA.
Okay. And then I think just in terms of, does that create any additional issues? This might be outside of yours, but it might have some overlap, but the impervious surface and then, being in a watershed, does that have any complications creating more paved route here?
I think I'm going to have to defer to the case planner or somebody in stormwater about that one.
One more in your area.
Sure.
I guess I'll tackle it all while you're up there. But I think this would create a number of trips generated off of Saxton Way, right? If it connected to Strickland, you would start seeing a lot of folks probably cutting up through that new route.
And I went and put in 98 single-family homes plus the 20 in that are, we're estimating are allowable in here. And, that would increase traffic if it wasn't connected about 20% there. It's still well within the capacity of a minor side street and a neighborhood street. but it would increase traffic there. If it were connected, theoretically, not only is the preponderance of new traffic going to take the shortest path out, some of the folks in the existing neighborhood are going to take the shorter path out, and it's actually going to reduce traffic, which is why the comp plan directs us to connect streets in general.
Hi, I'm Sally Hoyt from Stormwater. Regardless of what is required in terms of public streets or sidewalk connections, it will all count towards the impervious limits for the development as a whole.
So adding the street would reduce potentially, like,
It would
another home or
potentially
something?
reduce how much could be done on site.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments? All right. Go right ahead.
Sorry, I have one more. So do I understand that the applicant is willing to consider the access to Strickland if they can make it work grading wise, revise the plan and still stick under the Falls Watershed Protection 40% impervious? Is that an accurate statement?
Our goal in the next 2 to 3 weeks, up until the May 10th Planning Commission date, would be to look at a pedestrian access point to Strickland Road. Emily Rothrock and her team have taken a long look at the connection to Strickland Road, given the amount of grading, the amount of tree planting that would have to go in behind that street to comply with the 40% forestation requirement, with the litany of driveways and access points within close proximity to it, with the water feature that moves east to west through a majority of that southern portion. We don't think that a street connection is in the best interest of the Falls watershed. Given the low amounts of AM and PM traffic that Mr. Myers calculated in his initial staff report, with 7 additional trips in the morning and 10 additional trips in the afternoon, going from current entitlements to proposed entitlements. We think that a pedestrian connection addresses a connectivity piece with regards to the Publix shopping center and the Harris Teeter shopping center, while minimally impacting Saxon Way, with, as Jason said, plenty of capacity to support 20 single-family homes. So the long answer is we're solely looking at a pedestrian connection at this point.
So the answer is you've already considered it, and you just brought up a point that, can you pull your site plan back up for a second?
Sure.
That I want to, sorry, Chair Fox, this is my last one.
Just to clarify, you were saying that you are considering and would like this deferral to allow you to craft the condition that puts forward the pedestrian and bike connection to Strickland Road?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
And then I guess the other thing I didn't think about, but I think you just said, and it makes sense looking at this, that to grade in that road, you're going to have to do a lot of grading beyond the limits of the street itself, which is going to take down a lot of that existing vegetation between the cul-de-sac and Strickland.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Let's go right ahead.
Is there any opportunity to connect the trail to just go over the parking lot to the Publix as well? I mean, I know you can go down to Strickland, but are you able to cut to the Publix at all? Have a little side one?
Let me pull up. So the question was, could we have a street crossing?
No,
Like
in
a-
addition to the path going down to Strickland, can it just have like a little cut through to the shopping center? I think people are going to try and cut through anyway, although I could see a fence going up, but it seems like that would be awfully convenient and prevent people from carrying a lot of groceries around, and because they would still be deterred to carry groceries that distance if you can cut it in there, if the shopping center is amenable to that.
And I think, and we had looked at that, and again, they have a retaining wall that runs up to the Wells Fargo Bank, which is kind of on both of those two out parcels there. And then, so if you're looking to make that connection past their fencing, now you're looking at probably the steepest slope, or slope differential on the property. And so what we've thought of as a compromise, and what Ann Conlon with the Transportation Department has looked at and thought was a pretty good idea, is to have this switchback and then have it run sort of parallel with Strickland right up until the Wells Fargo Bank out parcels. There is some narrow additional sidewalk space there. There's been conversations about what else needs to take place and what rights or responsibilities we could commit to without the consent of the Wells Fargo Bank. So that's kind of part of the condition as well, is how do we incorporate, some additional path that gets you to there. So that's part of the kind of fitting the pieces of the puzzle together. But I will say that we've looked at a lot of different places that we could put either a vehicular access point or a pedestrian access point, and unfortunately, just given what's in place today, and both from a design and from a topography perspective, we think that this is going to ultimately be the best solution.
Thank you. Without objection, I'm going to recommend that we do defer this case to May 10th to allow the applicant additional time to craft conditions about pedestrian connection to Strickland Road. Seeing none? All right. Let's move on to new business item E.2, rezoning case Z8321, which is 1420 Garner Road. We will start out with a staff presentation from Hannah Recco.
All right, good morning. This is case Z8321, request to rezone one parcel, 1420 Garner Road, from industrial mixed use 3 stories to office mixed use 5 stories, urban limited conditional use. There's sort of 2 areas of zoning in this area. Surrounding immediately the site is other parcels zoned with industrial mixed use and heavy industrial, and then residential area zoned R10 and RX3, and you can see the South Park NCOD to the north. And then the land uses follow that zoning. So this site is south of downtown, north of I-40, and near the South Wilmington Street corridor. Zoom into the site, you can see that it is at the corner of Saints Avenue and Garner Road. The site is currently vacant. What you're seeing there is a concrete pad. And here's some views of the site from both Saints Ave and Garner Road. There are 3 conditions proposed. The first prohibits some uses normally permitted in OX. Second offers a maximum number of residential units, 365, and the third offers a maximum number of non-residential uses, capped at 2,000 square feet. So you can see the residential entitlement going up significantly. This is partially from a removal in IX. Residential units are not permitted on the ground floor. They are in OX, and then the building height is going from 3 stories to 5 stories. The site has an average transit score and walk score compared to the city overall. It does have a higher bike score and lower transportation costs and higher proximity to jobs than the city ride average. 2 bus lines serve the site, both going down Garner Road, Route 20 and Route 22, both having 30-minute service. And then the request would add potential units to the housing supply, permit a variety of housing types, allow smaller units, smaller lots, and as we saw, is within walking distance of transit. The request does not guarantee any subsidized affordable units. And the EJ screen tool shows that the surrounding population, high proportion of people of color, low income, and those with less than a high school education. And for land use history, it's worth noting that this area was annexed before the Civil Rights Acts of 64 and 68. Apologize for the typo in the frontage here. The request OX5 is consistent with the future land use map designation, which is office and residential mixed use. The request has an urban limited frontage, which is consistent with the urban form map. The site is mostly within a core transit area. And then the request is consistent overall with the comprehensive plan. That includes a number of policies, including future land use map, density transition, zoning districts, increasing housing variety and housing entitlement. And then LU 11.4 is a policy specifying support for rezoning of industrial areas if the future land use map does not support continued industrial area in the future. A few more consistent policies. And then there is one inconsistent policy, LU 5.7. This policy says in part that when a mixed use district is across the street from a residential area, assuming it's not a major road, that the building height should be capped at 3 stories along that frontage. This request would allow up to 5 stories, and it is across the street on Gardner Road from a residential area. And that concludes the staff presentation. Your deadline is in June, and you have a number of meetings before then.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from the applicant team. The applicant and those in support have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning, Chair Fox and members of the commission. I'm Mark Frederick with Parker, Poe, Adams, and Bernstein at 301 Fayetteville Street, here on behalf of the applicant. Hannah did a great job in presenting our request, so I'll just be brief and add a few additional key points. So the request is for just one parcel at 1420 Garner Road. It's about 4.7 acres in area and currently zoned IX3. The property to the north and south are also zoned IX3, and the property directly to the west was rezoned in 2019 to IX 5 stories. The areas to the east and further to the north are primarily residential and zoned R10. And the purpose of this rezoning is to allow redevelopment of the site, which has been it's been sitting vacant for about 10 years now, to allow the redevelopment of the site, to allow some uses that are more compatible with the surrounding areas, and provide a better transition from those residential uses to the east to the more industrial uses to the west. The future land use map designates this site for office and residential mixed uses. Again, as you can see, providing that transition and consistent with that future land use map designation, we are requesting an OX5 ULCU designation. The request is also consistent with the urban form map, which places this site within the core transit area, and the request is also consistent with policies recommending for additional housing supply and housing variety in the area. And finally, the request is also consistent with comprehensive plan vision themes for additional housing supply and growing successful neighborhoods and communities. So with that, we respectfully request your recommendation for approval, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak in opposition on this case? Seeing none, I'll open it up for questions and comments from commissioners. Go ahead.
I just have a disclosure, David York, I'm on the Board of Passage Home, which just recently rezoned the corner of Hoke and Garner. Am I okay still voting on this one? Perfect, thank you.
Any questions or comments from commissioners?
Oh, we got a question. This property is currently owned by a church, is that correct?
That's correct.
Does the church plan on having a community benefit or selling, or what is the church's plans for this? Do they plan on retaining this property?
So the applicant is the contract purchaser for the property, so the church is selling the property.
Okay.
Any additional questions or comments? Go ahead.
Just question, curious if the applicant would be open to considering reducing the building height along the side of the site that abuts the residential area?
Yeah, so we've taken that under consideration, and with the proximity to the downtown core, with public access to transit, and the close proximity to future BRT, we do think 5 stories is needed for the density to provide that additional housing in the area.
Additional questions or comments from commissioners? Nope. Seeing none, then I would entertain a motion. Commissioner Bennett?
I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated April 12th, 2022, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment. The action taken is reasonable and in the public interest because the request would increase the number of possible dwelling units on the site. The request would permit uses that would act as a transition between the existing residential and light industrial use areas.
Excellent. And do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner O'Haver. Is there any additional discussion or debate on the merits of the motion? Seeing none, by show of hands, those in favor of approving Z 8321? And any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Moving on to new business item E.3, which is rezoning case Z 8721, Glenwood Avenue and West North Street. We will start out with a staff presentation from J.P. Manself.
Good morning, J.P. Mansoff with Planning and Development. This is rezoning case Z 8721. It's a request to rezone just over an acre of land from DX7 shopfront to DX40 shopfront with zoning conditions. RHDC did review the case and discuss it, but provided no formal comment as they didn't. I think the general consensus was there was a lack, there was no major impacts to historic resources. Plan and your deadline for action is June 11th, 2022. East of the site is generally zoned downtown mixed use with varying heights from 7 to up to 40 stories, which is just to the north of the site. West of the site, you have the North Boylan NCOD, and generally some office mixed use and commercial mixed use zoning of a generally lower height, 3 to 7 stories. Here's an aerial of the site. So the block to the north was the site of the Creamer rezoning, which is a 40-story rezoning approved last year. And there are several mid-rise apartment and mixed-use buildings surrounding the site from 5 to 7 stories, and then the 400 West building being, I think, around 15 stories. So a mix of heights in the area. Here are some views of the site. So top left looking east on West North, so that's the northern edge of the site. looking east on West Lane, which is the southern boundary of the site, and then a couple of views along Glenwood Avenue, just kind of showing the current building frontages that exist today. There is one condition included in the request, which prohibits several uses that would otherwise be allowed in the downtown mixed-use district. The request would generally allow increased residential density and units, increase in office square footage, and there is a decrease shown here in the retail square footage. I think that's more of a function of the Envision software. I think generally if you assume ground floor retail would probably be a similar amount of retail, kind of just a quirk of the software there. It scores well with the transportation and energy analysis, so higher walk, bike, and transit score than the city average given its location downtown. Higher transportation costs, which means lower transportation costs, and higher job proximity given its location near the downtown job center. There is currently the site is currently served by one transit route, which is Route 6, and that provides a 30-minute frequency. The request does add to the housing supply. No subsidized units are included. With the shopfront frontage, only apartments would be allowed, but generally smaller units and smaller lots than the city average would be allowed, and it is within walking distance of transit. So the demographic analysis showed that the site was generally less diverse, wealthier, and more educated than the city average, and rent in the area has generally increased at a similar rate to the city average. The requested DX district is consistent with the Central Business District future land use designation, and the shopfront frontage is consistent with the downtown and core transit area designation on the urban form map. Overall, the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan in addition to the future land use map and the urban form map, and also consistent with several policies regarding more intense land uses in close proximity to transit, including a future BRT station, increasing housing supply, some urban design policies with the shopfront frontage it's consistent with, and also some downtown policies regarding higher density development and vertical mixed use development in the downtown area. There is one inconsistent policy, which is regarding public realm amenities. Parks did provide a comment that given the population density and the location, this is a high priority area for public realm amenities, and so that is not guaranteed with the zoning conditions, so just recognizing that comment. Again, your deadline for action is June 11th, and there are currently no outstanding issues, and there are several meetings coming up in which you could discuss the case. Happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from the applicant team. The applicant and those in support have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Molly Stewart, Morningstar Law Group, 421 Fayetteville Street. Good morning, Commissioners. It's great to see you in person. I will start by noting that this is an owner-initiated request. The owners of these parcels are not developers, so we don't have an imminent or any immediate plan to develop this site. I'll note that in our 2 neighborhood meetings, there was no opposition noted to this request. So on your screen, you see that there is a 32-story site plan in across the street to the north. Right now, you saw that 40-story zoning in Mr. Mansoff's presentation. And just to zoom a little bit so you can see that is, I'm sorry, we're showing 37 stories on this site directly across the street to the north. For a little bit of additional context, this is the quarter-mile radius from the site. The 2 stars represent the 2 potential locations for bus rapid transit stations, so walkable within that quarter mile. as well as all of Glenwood South and the Smoky Hollow development. Within the half-mile radius, you additionally include Seaboard and much of downtown. Taking another look at the urban form map, we're obviously in that downtown designation as well as the core transit area. In short, it's hard to imagine a better location to build on our existing mixed uses and our plentiful transportation options by maximizing the entitlement for housing and other uses available at this location. Just another view of kind of showing how this site fits into the overall urban form map. In conclusion, this request is supported by not only the long list of policies that you saw in the staff presentation, but also in particular our cornerstone policies of expanding that entitlement for a variety of mixed uses, including housing that's near transit services and jobs, in order to capitalize on transit access and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Thank you.
Thank you. Is anyone from the public here to speak on this item? Or are you finished, Molly? I'm sorry.
I am, thank you.
Okay. you looked confused. I'm going to guess that no one is here to speak on it. So questions and comments. I'll start off, just a quick question, Molly, while you're still up there. In the staff report, there was a comment related to having public realm amenities associated with the case. I did note, too, there's either a large bike share or just bike parking that I think is on Lane Street. Would the applicant consider either replacing that in kind or some other kind of public amenity in a condition?
So we did look into that for sure. There is a bike share on the next block to the north that's being offered, as well as there to the to the south, as you mentioned. Given the constraints of this fairly tight urban site, I know the applicant is certainly interested in these amenities and believe that they would be helpful to their own users, but given that this is owner-initiated and not initiated by a developer with a plan in hand, we can't necessarily say how that would fit into the site today. So certainly open to working with the city on those issues, but unfortunately not able to offer those as a zoning condition at this time.
Then I see a question, Commissioner Raines.
Thanks, Chair Fox. Yeah, you asked one of my questions. So if the site is tight, another staff comment was a pet area or public art. Would those be considerations the applicant would consider?
We did consider, we heard these comments from staff and certainly kind of sat down and talked about them, and ultimately just not really knowing where this is going, decided to seek the maximum flexibility to be able to respond to what the most pressing needs are in this area, whether it's the mixed use, the housing, whatever it is, and to do that in the best way possible. That said, once that larger direction is determined, then they'll be able to consider offering those items as well.
Commissioner O'Haver, did you have a question? Or
Yeah, I was just going to make a comment, and I figured Commissioner Raines was going to bring up the amenity area. Certainly understanding the challenges, and this isn't directed towards this particular case or applicant at all, but we're hearing that a lot. The site's tight, don't know what's going on in the future, can't offer it now. So we've heard recently a couple of those, and I think we need to continue to try to work with the applicants, especially along Glenwood, and get what we can out of, especially along here, the public realm and the amenities. So certainly understanding, needing the flexibility, so on and so forth. Again, this isn't directed at you, Ms. Stewart, or this particular case. This is just something that I think has come before us at least 3 times, 4 times maybe in the last couple months. So just throwing that out there for consideration to my fellow commissioners.
Commissioner Lamon.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a feeling like a blank check kind of a thing where if you just allow, anything can happen in the future. So I'm kind of on the same page there.
Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you. Along those same lines, I was going to ask maybe staff, maybe Ms. Stewart, I'm not sure, but is there, I mean, I understand since this is owner-initiated and not a developer, you don't know what the plan is, but could there be some sort of condition to at least say it's going to be, something would be included that is compatible with whatever is developed, so whoever ends up developing it knows they have to look at this. So you're not dictating specifically what has to be done, but that something needs to be done that is compatible with what is ultimately developed.
Instead of answering your question directly, I'm going to take a giant step back and ask the commission what problem are you trying to solve here? And I think what I'm hearing is at least a high level discomfort with uncertainty, right? I typically start with what's required from the code standpoint, right? When there's a development that comes in, staff is required to review the development standards that are in place. So if we're thinking of amenity area, for instance, there is a requirement for a 5% amenity area across the board. There are additional standards for taller buildings or buildings that have an urban frontage. If we're thinking about it from the standpoint of bicycle parking or access, there are standards in the code today that address that, right? So instead of answering your question directly, I apologize. I would ask, what problem are we trying to solve for through the condition, and then we could maybe help you get there.
Go right ahead.
So from my perspective, I'm trying to address the inconsistency that was pointed out in the staff report, but it sounds like if what you're saying is these issues are addressed in the code, then why is it an inconsistency? Maybe I'm not clear on what the inconsistency is.
That's a fair question. I'd ask JP to step in, yeah.
So Parks specifically has a sort of list of specific amenities that they're looking for, and so I think to address that inconsistency, one of those specific amenities, and I can look at that now, so that's publicly accessible open space, public art, public play areas, or pet amenity areas, and so a condition that would address any of those for specific public realm items would address the inconsistency there.
And just to clarify, those items that you listed off are a request or recommendation from parks that are in addition and exceed code minimum requirements.
Right, that's
okay.
right.
I would simply say it's a more specific implementation of the amenity standards that are already in the code.
Okay, so it's going back a little bit to the question that I believe Commissioner Bennett posed, would the applicant be interested or would the applicant consider adding language with a condition to some of those types of amenities but not commit to square footage?
My understanding is that once we draft a zoning condition, it needs to be something that in plan review one could look at the plan and check off whether it's been satisfied. I wouldn't know how to draft that. And in particular, I would notice, as you heard a little bit of, it's not as though there is nothing kind of being offered here. There are the minimums of the code, as well as that shopfront frontage comes with many obligations that are not sort of encompassed in the underlying district. The current zoning would be much more inconsistent with our policies as far as taking advantage of the transit and the surrounding mixed use in the area.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Hagan?
Actually, I think Ms. Bennett
Ms.
has
Bennett?
another question
Okay,
too
go ahead.
before I go.
You just looked at me and saw that.
Well, no, I was getting ready to pull my mic down, but then I remembered you had went like that, so I wanted to give you the opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
To going back to what Travis just said in response to Chair Fox, is this asking for something above and beyond what is required, or is it asking for specifics related to what is required?
That's a really great question. The way that I read this policy is it's intended to refine the allowance or the requirement in the code, right? So
Okay.
from a code standpoint, an amenity area can take the form of many different things. And this policy is intended to narrow that focus down.
Okay, so then is it actually an inconsistency, or is it just not specific enough for parks? I'm trying to, it sounds like maybe they're not inconsistent, they're just not giving the specificity that parks wanted to see. So is it fair to call it an inconsistency?
Not say it's an inconsistent policy, only because, again, the code allows for a very wide range of implementation for amenity area.
Okay.
This specific policy is focused on the downtown area, and it identifies what is more appropriate in downtown.
Okay.
That's fair. That's fair. So personally, I did put in my notes as well that that was noted as an inconsistency. I do believe that those things would be addressed per the code, and that long list of amenities that could be provided per code would be acceptable to me personally. I don't know if the additional comments.
So, for me to answer Travis's question, the problem that I'm trying to solve is that I, in my past life, understand how that public space can be chopped up and divided to meet the minimum requirements. And a lot of times, unfortunately, in my personal opinion, it did not provide what I think is a meaningful space within the public realm. And so, again, this isn't focused towards the applicant, because this is really more dealing with the code as it stands now. And I think, y'all correct me if I'm wrong, on the creamery there was, they were proposing some amenity space on there. And I feel like y'all know this, and Ms. Stewart knows this, I'm in favor of development and dense development in these areas. But I just don't think, and this is a bigger problem, I don't think our code as it stands to meet the minimums are really giving this community, I think, what it deserves as we continue to grow and densify. So that's the problem I'm trying to correct.
Additional comments? One last one. Go right ahead.
I feel like I'm piggybacking on Commissioner O'Haver, but I tend to agree with them. It's not necessarily directed at this particular case, Molly, but I feel like if we are going to allow 40-story rezonings, then we should require more than the minimum. I think 40 stories should require more than the minimum. And however the condition gets crafted so it doesn't pigeonhole the applicant, I just feel like this is sort of the big rezoning, and I just think it requires a commitment of more than just the minimum.
Thank you. So I'm hearing two things. One, there may be a deficiency in the code. That might be something that we could look at. The second part is there's still an interest in allowing some time for the applicant to reconsider their relationship and desire to have conditions related to public realm amenities. Without objection, I might recommend a deferral to our May 10th meeting to allow that contemplation to take place.
Can I ask a question, though?
Sure, go ahead.
Because we've been down this road before, and these are the cases from our last meeting. I think we should ask the applicant if they're willing, because if the answer is no, and we defer for 2 weeks, and we come back and the answer's like, no, we're not going to do it, that puts us in a pretty awkward position. Now, I guess the flip side of the coin on that is, if they're going to come back and say no, at least it gives us some opportunity to converse with the applicant and maybe convince them otherwise. I would suggest that maybe we do that, because otherwise now the applicant's putting us in a situation where they're just going to say no, and so now we're sort of bound to make a decision today. So, yeah. So I guess let me just ask the question to the applicant: are y'all willing to consider this, or are we going to come back in here that can't be done, and that this is just what we have to offer?
In order to answer that, there are two things I need to find out, and one I can ask here today. I've heard a desire to not necessarily, sort of begin design on this site or to pigeonhole us. however, to create something that's enforceable. I know that usually it's staff who gets tasked with trying to tease out which is which, and if it's possible to have that kind of flexibility in a zoning condition, I would like to ask staff if we feel that that is something that can be accomplished.
Yes.
I was going to answer for you, but thank you. Yes. Yes. Hearing that, does that change your opinion of my recommendation? For
Oh, I didn't
referral?
have an opinion on your recommendation. I just wanted to, yeah.
Yes, I know that it's something that we've run into many times, saying, well, we want, sort of to express a desire to do X, but we really don't know what that is. So hopefully staff's right, and we'll be able to come up with something. And so with that, I think we will certainly try to work with staff and figure out what that means, and see if there's something that we can offer. As I said, we're not able to get to a design level and start to talk about dedicating an area or something like that. So we'll need to figure out what that means.
So I'll second your motion, Chair Fox, to defer.
Okay. We don't necessarily have to vote, but I'm going to go ahead and show of hands. Those in support of the deferral to May 10th. There we go. Any in opposition? No? All right.
If I could just, too, before the applicant leaves, make one more comment. I think that, and again, it's not directed towards this case specifically. Sorry to keep saying that. I agree with Commissioner Bennett. I mean, 40 stories on this size parcel, I think that there could be a commitment to something more than the minimum at 40 stories. So I understand that this particular applicant's not at a level of design, but I think when they get to that point at a 40-story ask, I think we can probably figure it out. So that's just a comment.
Excellent. Thank you. Moving on to new business item E.4, which is the Comprehensive Plan Annual Progress Report. I believe Mr. Anagnost. Thank you.
Great. Good morning, Chair Fox, members of the Commission. This is the Fiscal Year 21 Comprehensive Plan Progress Report. And so some of you may be familiar with this process of staff preparing an annual progress report to document the City Council actions. Am I supposed to bring up the presentation? I apologize. First time. Here we go. That is to document both City Council actions that have occurred in the fiscal year prior, as well as needed changes to the comprehensive plan document itself relative to the action items that are listed in the comprehensive plan. There's also a component that is addressing what are called emerging issues in Raleigh. So basically, topics that staff believes will be relevant to the comprehensive plan or already are relevant to the comprehensive plan based on changes in real world activities that we see occurring or development patterns. And so the item that you're seeing before you right now is the progress report itself, that documentation. The next item that you're going to see on the agenda is a comprehensive plan amendment that includes the action items that are proposed to be changed. And so with this progress report item in the agenda, we're going to focus mostly on the emerging issues portion of the progress report document, because that is where staff would be seeking action from you today. And that action could be in the form of making a recommendation to the City Council of whether the City Council should direct staff to pursue any of the topics that are listed in the emerging issues section of the progress report. And so those topics are listed here. There are three, and they start with coordinating planning and budgeting. So this is something that is commonplace across jurisdictions and municipalities across the United States, and it's something that already occurs in Raleigh, in the city of Raleigh. The budget document that the Office of Management and Budget produces each year for the City Council does include review by departments of any relevant comprehensive plan policies and actions, as well as review against the city's strategic plan. But there are instances in other jurisdictions where the actual creation of planning documents and budget documents are more closely tied during their creation to each other. So essentially, where you see area and corridor plans that come before you today, they will have some amount of information about expected budget impacts and expenditures, but there's not an immediate and direct tie to a particular budget cycle, and there's not an attempt during those planning processes for area and corridor planning processes to actually identify a project scope in any great detail. And so those are the types of things that other jurisdictions have started attempting to do, is to kind of really bring in some of those more technical details into the planning process so that the path to implementation is more clearly laid out as to how those actions in the plan get turned into budget items and then get turned into projects. And the other way that this can be helpful is that coordinating planning and budget in that way can also be a venue for participatory budgeting. So basically having more public input into the budget process. We do have the public hearings and the work sessions that occur with the annual budget review at the City Council, but there are many jurisdictions where there's participatory activities where citizens and residents actually give direct guidance for expenditures within the budget. So that's the first topic. The second topic is about economic development and placemaking. And so again, this is sort of related to area and corridor planning processes where historically the city has largely relied on transportation projects and land use policy maps as the implementation element of those small area and corridor planning processes. And then in more recent years, we have been focusing more on economic development and economic and community stabilization. You saw an example of that with the Capital North Corridor Plan that you recently reviewed, and you will see a more extensive exploration of that technique in the New Bern Station area planning that is going to reach you in probably the next 2 to 3 months of basically developing actions that seek to not only look to a future vision for how development and infrastructure investments can occur in a particular area, but also what is the current condition on the ground and how can that existing community and business environment be prepared for those changes. And so this is where there are tools that we can incorporate into those planning processes that make that, again, more clear, more direct, and make that a bigger component of what we think of as an area plan or a corridor plan. And then finally, naturally occurring affordable housing. So in Raleigh and in Wake County, there is documentation that naturally occurring affordable housing is being redeveloped to new market rate housing that is not as affordable, and the naturally occurring affordable housing that is being lost to that pattern of development is not being replaced as quickly as it is being lost. And so there are other jurisdictions where there are methods and tools to try to encourage or at least make property owners aware that they are in possession of naturally occurring affordable housing and that there's going to be pressure to redevelop those sites. And so this is the final topic in the emerging issues section of the progress report, which is to say, does the city need to invest more resources in those types of tools to basically monitor the existence and redevelopment of naturally occurring affordable housing, and then to work with those property owners to look for different options aside from full redevelopment of those properties. So those are the 3 items that you have for potential recommendation to the City Council, and that's the end of the presentation for this agenda item. I'm happy to take any questions.
Just want to verify no members of the public are here to speak on this? Nope. Okay. Questions or comments from commissioners? Go ahead, Commissioner Raines.
I'll start. Thanks, Chair Fox. So these 3 initiatives are, I was a little confused about what the ask is. Are you asking for recommendation for staff to look into these, or recommendation for funding for additional staff or consultants, or how? If you can explain a little bit more about.
Yeah. So the nature of these is your recommendation would be to the City Council to direct staff to explore these items further. So there's no particular programmatic initiative, no expenditure of funds that's being requested at this time. It's really just, does staff have permission from the City Council to look into these ideas, and then we would return to the City Council, and depending on the nature of City Council's action in response to that, potentially return to you or return to other departments and basically take it from there to consider budget expenditures or new programs. So really it's just getting direction from City Council. Do they want staff to spend staff time researching these ideas? No actual material action at this time.
Just a side question, were these council initiated though? No? This is staff initiated?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Would it be appropriate for us to add additional ones for consideration at this time as well?
It's certainly within, your discretion as this appointed body of the city council.
All right. I know, I just got a lot of eye lasers at me all at one time. Well, I will acknowledge one emerging trend or one common theme in many of the rezoning cases that we've seen is centered around community benefits or impacts to communities. Now, thinking on the fly here, I don't really know what that looks like in terms of recommending to you how to address that. One thing I might look at, perhaps Detroit's community benefit ordinance as a thought. This is an issue I know council was interested in looking at providing guidelines for development agreements. And that's moving forward. It's in the code now. So perhaps you would look at that and say that's already been addressed. But I'm just going to acknowledge that's a common theme that we see and hear that I was noting was absent from the review.
If I may respond. Yeah, I think that's a good topic. The thing I would like to bring to the commission's attention is that there has been a fairly extensive update to the comprehensive plan initiated with a focus on equity, and that'll be starting next year. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for that update to incorporate the ideas like you're talking about, and I expect that it will. So I would just encourage the commission, if you're thinking of additional ideas, to remember that process will begin in about a year's time, and so you'll have an opportunity to explore a lot of things like that.
That's helpful. Thank you. Additional questions or comments? Go ahead.
I was just going to add that the community benefits discussion that you referenced might also be under the economic development and placemaking as staff is looking at neighborhood stabilization. It's certainly a stabilization technique. So
that's a good point.
It might be under that umbrella.
That's a good point. So I'll leave that to a means and methods. So you don't give me any more eye lasers. Okay. With that, then, I'm guessing you're seeking, I'd make a motion to recommend to City Council that they direct staff to begin drafting comprehensive plan amendments as stated. Is that sufficient?
I think, did you have a comment? I do before we do that, but can you answer Chair Fox's question? Then I'll go.
Yeah, I think the component of the motion about comprehensive plan amendments might be a little more specific than is needed, because we don't know if that research would produce comprehensive plan amendments yet.
Thank you.
So in a couple of comments in trying to keep, again, so I don't get any laser eyes under these three buckets. Y'all know one of my, and I guess it works with planning and budgeting, but one of my hang-ups here recently is the dashed lines in the comprehensive plan on roadway. So I don't know if that fits under planning and budgeting, but I'm just going to throw that out there again because it comes up on just about every single case, and a lot of times it is for the applicant, it is a budget issue, not always, but regularly. And so just throw that out there for consideration. Under the economic development and placemaking, and I guess this is probably a comment on the comprehensive plan overall, but we just saw it. I mean, we just asked an applicant to do something additional in development and placemaking, and the comprehensive plan is providing recommendations and a sort of a path forward, but we don't have enough teeth to really kind of hold their feet to the fire on that. And so I don't know if under this economic development and placemaking, certainly let's consider that these are the orange bullets and not the non-orange bullets. I can't remember what the terms were that we put on those, but by the way, that's super helpful since we've made that change over the past year. But just to consider in whatever way, again, means and methods on giving us a little bit more to stand on up here, especially whether it goes to community benefits or the public realm in dense urban areas, to give us something to be able to look to the applicant and say, you know, this is what you need to do. So just some thoughts. I don't know how you solve that, but I certainly know how to solve the first one with the dash lines, but I'll leave that one up to y'all.
And those are two great comments. The way I would respond to them is they're both great discussion items for us as a body, and maybe we do that in a retreat setting. We have had continued conversation about the street plan map and the impacts of that at the rezoning stage and impacts at the development stage. So I think that's a very ripe topic for us to talk about. I do disagree somewhat with your second point about the Planning Commission not having any teeth. You're a recommending body to the City Council, and the comprehensive plan identifies policy statements and action items that the city has agreed upon, and staff identifies those as either being key policies or not, and identifies them in the staff report. If the Planning Commission is uncomfortable with a request, your ultimate teeth is to recommend denial. That's the part of the process.
That's totally fair, and I probably obviously was shooting from the hip. That probably wasn't the right way to describe that, to have teeth, because you're absolutely right. I mean, I wasn't downplaying what we're doing up here or the impacts of what our recommendations are. I guess I'll just try to rephrase that, and I think the intent hopefully gets across is that, I mean, we just saw it transpire, and we all were kind of like looking at each other like, you know, hey, is this what we should be doing? Or, you know, I would just be much more comfortable to say, this is what we need to do, versus us kind of looking at each other saying, oh, is this meeting the intent? And again, Commissioner Bennett always has great questions about, is it inconsistent? Is it not inconsistent? I mean, it's a little sort of like, okay, what do we do here? So you're right. I would like us to have a little bit firmer ground to stand on when we show our teeth, I guess.
Don't know how to follow that up. Sometimes you just build your own ground and stand on it.
This is true.
Okay. Any additional questions for Mr. Anagnos, who's very patiently waiting for us to move forward? Okay, then I will go back and make an official motion to recommend to City Council to direct staff to address the issues that you've identified.
Second.
And by show of hands, those in support and any opposed, that motion passes unanimously.
Just to ask the question, are any of those items that were brought up, anything that we want to put into any of the subcommittees? That was the only thing I was thinking is some of those. Okay.
Recommendation probably. Yeah.
I would agree with that. And if those of you can't hear at the other end of the table, when additional staff information comes back regarding those issues, we might find some of them might be appropriate to put in one of our subcommittees. Right. Thank you. And then I believe we can move on to CP 222, Omnibus Comprehensive Plan Amendment.
All right. Thank you again. So as I mentioned in the previous item, a portion of the progress report is an inventory of the action items from the comprehensive plan. And planning and development staff ask staff from departments across the city to basically review the action items that are assigned to those departments and tell us whether, if they have been completed or if they still reflect the activities of that department's work. And so that's what you see in this comprehensive plan amendment. And so what you have before you is a comprehensive plan amendment. So, you know, your action recommendation today and City Council's ultimate action would be to revise the text of the comprehensive plan document. So this is not initiation of a separate review. This is the review. And so you can see this inventory here of what is actually proposed to be changed in the action items and that we had reviewed by the other city departments. And we like to start off this presentation with some featured projects that have led to completion of some of the actions that we see here. It was a bit of a quiet fiscal year, so this is fiscal year going from July 2020 to June 2021. So not as much of a blockbuster as previous years where you saw things like the Dix Park Master Plan, the Raleigh Union Station, transportation projects around Capitol Boulevard. So a little bit quieter this year. That's how these things go. But we did have the completion of the Law Enforcement Training Center, which serves both Raleigh Police Department and the Wake County Sheriff's Office, as well as a new arts training program from the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Department, and then a traffic calming project on Buck Jones, leading to some actions being noted as completed. We also had some actions that were requested to be removed by departments. Basically, their work activities are no longer oriented towards those particular actions, or in some cases, if those actions have been pursued and the information that has been gained from that shows that they are not likely to work out. And so I think the two in the center here are good examples of that. HP 3.6 would require changes to state law that staff does not believe would be supported by the General Assembly. And then the Downtown 5.5 also requires coordination with the state, and also staff does not believe that that's likely to lead to much progress on that front. So just trying to have a sort of reality check for some of those, and if they're not likely to pan out, let's not keep them in the plan. And then some that are basically, so there are some actions that are just redundant with policies that already exist. And that's a common occurrence with these that are converted actions. So these are actions that basically make more sense as a policy because it is an activity that that department intends to continue to perform in the long term. There are some things that are more technical revisions, so basically the time frame when we expect the action to be implemented. So those, are short-term, mid-term, long-term, and ongoing. So some of those, they move from mid-term to long-term or short-term to mid-term if they've taken longer than originally expected. And then the responsible agency. So one thing that was noted at the beginning of the presentation is that with the restructuring of the Office of Economic Development and Innovation and movement of that office into the Housing and Neighborhoods Department, some of the activities that were formerly conducted by that office have now been transferred to the Raleigh Chamber of Commerce, or the Raleigh Chamber as it refers to itself in its promotional materials. And so those kind of things are reflected in this implementation matrix, that those specific details. And then there are actions where the actual text of the action directing a certain activity is modified, and those can take a couple of different forms. So this one in particular is just saying that this is a type of activity that the city does not do ourselves. We make recommendations or provide guidance to other agencies, and so it just needs to be reworded to reflect who is actually going to perform that activity and what the city's role is in that. Another is this one related to Morgan Street, where a portion of the action has been completed, and so the action is now being refined to reflect the current status of where the transportation department is moving with that, just making that reflect the current state of those activities. And then if there's a difference of how the action is meant to be carried out by the department, so if the strategy has shifted a little bit, that can also be reflected, as you can see here. And so that's kind of a summary. The full list of amendments is included in your backup materials. And so if you have any specific questions, I'm happy to respond to those.
Thank you, Mr. Anagnost. Any questions or comments from commissioners? Commissioner Raines?
Thanks, Chair Fox. 2 questions and a comment. On PU 5.5 stormwater basin, if that's removed, what happens to solids now? I know this is kind of a weird detail question, but if that's, it said something about it's not in their plan, stormwater management plan.
Yeah, I think that is speaking to not so much individual stormwater management devices that would be on private development sites. Those would still be maintained by the parties that own those developments, or their property owner associations, and inspected by the Stormwater Division. What that's really talking about is, in a larger basin-wide sense, are there areas where solids can be removed to expand the capacity of the basin, particularly natural features. And so basically what Stormwater communicated was that they are focusing on other activities to maintain basin health through the drainage basin planning that they're doing, which is conveyed by a separate policy and action. And so they felt like if that particular method of identifying solids within a drainage area and attempting to remove them is not a focus of their activities right now, then they don't want it to be an action in the plan that they are expected to implement.
Okay, thanks. Under HP 4.3, it says that 4.2 basically addresses it. Could you elaborate on the rehabilitation program and how HP 4.2 might address it?
Yeah, so HP 4.2 is saying something that's pretty similar. It's just a little bit more generalized. And so HP 4.2 is calling for, I'm just going to pull it up quickly so I have it in front of me. Is calling for a nonprofit advocacy group. And so that more general language made more sense to historic preservation staff as opposed to the more specific language in HB 4.3 that talks about the actual activities that organization might conduct, and that it's not sure that the activities that are listed in 4.3 would actually come to pass, and that level of detail is not needed. If the goal is to create the organization, then that organization then would ultimately have some say in what its activities would be. And so the specificity that's in 4.3 was excessive, basically. And then some of those things might be actually not within the purview of an organization like that.
Thank you. And just to comment, DT 7.4, I just would love to see Caswell Park back on the map. Just throwing that out there. I know that there's a lot of hurdles for that on the state level, but thanks.
Thank you.
So if you don't mind, I'll follow up, because the one, I agree with that, Commissioner Raines, and the one right before that I also hate to see just go away is conversion of Halifax Mall. Certainly understand staff doesn't have the resources, and that's more of a state issue, but I wonder if we really want to take that out of our comprehensive plan, because I think those are two very worthy long-term goals that I would rather keep in the front of the public versus have it go away. But that's just consideration, knowing that it goes beyond what staff's abilities are. And then my second question is on the policy conversions. Tree conservation ordinance item 2 says at the top that staff recommends converting the following 6 actions item into the paired policy statement. Can you explain what impact that has on EP 5.8 and this paired policy statement? Maybe I missed that.
Okay, so tree conservation ordinance, the original action says to identify areas where existing code or additional measures may be appropriate, and then the policy says revise the provisions based on best practices. So they're both pointing to best practices, and they're pointing to the other tree canopy goals identified in the comprehensive plan. So I think it's really, I don't think there's any policy weight that's being lost there. I think it's mostly just saying this is probably never going to be, there's never going to be a period at the end of this sentence, that we're going to continue to revise this ordinance as the community values change and evolve, and as best practices change, and potentially as state legislation changes. And so, it's hard to say it's difficult for us to foresee that action will ever be considered fully complete.
Got it. So that still allows, because quite frankly, I feel like in some conditions, some situations, we need a tree mitigation plan and not a tree conservation plan. And so this allows the community to continue to consider what best practices are for our community, which might include something like a mitigation in addition to a conservation plan, correct?
I think that policy would support that activity. I also think there are more broadly described policies within the plan that also would speak to that.
Great.
I think we don't have to think of it this way, but I think tree conservation in this context is largely pointing to specific enabling legislation from the General Assembly that refers to protection of existing trees. But I definitely think there's policy support for what you're describing between this and other policies in the plan.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bennett?
I think one of my questions has been answered, so I'll just make a comment about that, and that was about some of the actions that were recommended for removal, and sometimes the comment would say like lack of staff resources, and so my comment was, I think if we think it's important and it's a priority, we shouldn't remove it because of a lack of resources. I mean, there should be the pressure there to get the resources necessary to do it if we consider it a priority. My specific questions, though, relate to some of the ones that were moved from midterm to long-term. And I wonder if that's, again, related to staff resources, but specifically there were 3 local financing for transit. Actually, that's currently long-term, and I think my question was, why is it long-term? It seems like that's something we're considering right now as we're doing all of the TOD. Isn't it more of an immediate need, or shouldn't it be ongoing? Or I didn't understand why that one was long-term. And I'll just do the other 2 so you can answer them all. The other one was the T419 bike ride and car share. That one was changed to long-term. And again, isn't that more of an immediate need as we're seeing these developments come where we're asking them to incorporate these alternative modes of transportation? And we just approved removing parking minimums. So shouldn't that be more of an immediate, ongoing need? And then the third one was additional affordable housing tools. That was moved from midterm to long-term. Kind of the same comment. Why is it moved to long-term when it seems like something we're talking about on an ongoing basis?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe you're correct that the city departments are actively working on those actions right now, and in the immediate term. I think what they're trying to reflect with those long-term designations in the action matrix is that some of these require changes to local law or actions that from agencies beyond the city, and I think they're just trying to give a realistic projection of when they think they would be able to complete the action. That it's not, not that they're not working on it, it's just that some of those things take a while to work through the bureaucratic processes.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? With that, I'd entertain a motion. Commissioner Raines?
Thanks, Chair Fox. I move to recommend approval of the CP2-22 Omnibus Comprehensive Plan Amendment.
Excellent.
Sorry.
We may need to cite the consistency statement?
Not necessarily.
No.
Necessarily?
You don't have to
Okay.
cite consistency with the comp plan because you're amending the comp plan.
Oh, you provided a consistency statement. That's fine.
That's just
Just to help
duplicitous.
out.
Yeah.
There we go.
It's not a requirement to adopt one. You consider consistency with the comp plan in your evaluation of the
Excellent.
amendment, but you don't have to adopt it.
Might I friendly amendment, the action taken is reasonable in the public interest because it fulfills implementation policies in the 2030 comprehensive plan, as per the document that you put in our backup. Okay. All right. So we have a motion on the table from Commissioner Raines, and I believe we had a second. Who was the second? Commissioner Mayor. Any additional discussion or debate on the merits of the motion? Okay, those in favor? And any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. It's like a marathon. Okay. Okay, moving on to new business item E.6, Comprehensive Plan Amendment CP 1521, Frequent Transit Areas. We're going to start with a presentation from not Jason Harden, but Matt Clem.
That's right. Good morning, Chair Fox, members of the Planning Commission. So this item is CP 1521, Frequent Transit Areas. It's a companion map to text change TC 2021, or excuse me, TC 2021 Missing Middle 2.0, which reduces minimum lot sizes in transit-rich areas, allows more building types, and creates a density bonus for rent-controlled affordable housing. TC 2021 forecasts that these changes would apply in areas within walking distance of our frequent transit network and bus rapid transit network. So we'll look at a map that applies those changes to those areas in just a minute. So the Planning Commission unanimously approved TC 2021 last month. So more broadly, these changes and the mapping of the amendments to the urban form map are intended to assist in removing barriers created by exclusionary zoning, improve affordability by allowing more units in more affordable housing types, and reduce the per capita carbon emissions by allowing more units in housing types that are more energy efficient than detached houses. The amendment will also help to culturally modernize the city's growth policy and address and hopefully correct a long-running and pervasive narrative that has very successfully denigrated multifamily housing to the detriment of lower-income households. A narrative that has propagated the idea that apartments and townhouses don't belong in single-family neighborhoods. Generations of restricting multifamily housing, townhouses, and duplexes has created a market of scarcity in Raleigh. And for most of Raleigh's history, that type of housing had only been broadly permitted in areas of Raleigh that were racially segregated for black households. The same exclusion exists today through economic exclusion and the predominance of large lot detached housing subdivisions that comprise most of Raleigh's built environment, and a zoning framework that persists that pattern. The Missing Middle and Missing Middle 2.0 text changes have helped to address that built environment and that regulatory framework, and the map here and these changes help to advance those policy goals. So because race is a primary indicator of wealth and income, policies of exclusion and scarcity that increase housing costs in our built environment disproportionately disadvantage people of color. And these proposed changes to our policies and regulations are intended to provide more housing opportunities for more households with lower incomes and improve access to more households, to more neighborhoods of opportunity in our city. So the comprehensive plan amendment in front of you will update the urban form map. You can see the existing and proposed maps here. In the areas identified as frequent transit areas and BRT areas, the frequent transit development option will be available and will encourage those less expensive housing types. And they are centered around the city's frequent transit network. And you can see that that is broad-reaching in all areas of the city, as indicated on the map here. So CB 1521 will also clarify definitions of frequent transit areas as these locations within a half mile of a corridor proposed for a BRT service or a quarter mile of a route that will have frequent transit access. The amendment also defines bus rapid transit areas as locations within a quarter mile of BRT. The new policy will also recommend an urban approach to frontage in those areas. The request is consistent with all of the vision themes in the comprehensive plan. The theme of economic prosperity and equity is enhanced by removing the barriers created by exclusionary zoning practices that artificially limit access to living in high opportunity areas. Similarly, the theme of expanding housing choices is enhanced by allowing greater housing choice in neighborhoods across the city. The theme of managing our growth is enhanced by allowing more people to live in walkable places within the city rather than forcing many to move to the region's edge with the accompanying damage to natural resources and long-term infrastructure costs. The theme of Greenprint Raleigh Sustainable development is strengthened not just by diminishing the demand for far-flung development, but by allowing people to live in more energy-efficient housing types and live in more walkable places that encourage walkable lifestyles. The theme of coordinating land use and transportation is enhanced by allowing more people to live in these transit-rich areas. And lastly, growing successful neighborhoods and communities is supported by enhancing and allowing more housing types. So permitting missing middle housing types across the city, specifically in transit-rich areas, will provide greater access and opportunity for households with broader income ranges. Again, because race is the primary indicator of wealth and income, permitting these less expensive housing types to be constructed in more places will improve access to opportunities for households of color. These amendments will also encourage this type of housing in transit-rich areas, meaning that people who live in developments under these new guidelines will have access to reliable public transit. Because transportation costs can account for up to 30% of household expenditures, improving access to cheap and reliable transit also helps to reduce costs overall, cost of living. So with that, I will answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Just want to verify no members of the public are here to speak on this item. No? Okay, I'll start off with a question. Can you clarify for me again the buffer distances related to BRT versus regular bus versus train?
Yes, so the frequent transit areas, as shown on this map, are within a half-mile corridor of BRT and a quarter-mile of the other frequent transit routes.
Can you, just to follow up on that, can you explain the rationale for limiting to the quarter mile for trains or other larger capacity transit options?
I don't exactly know why that, or off the top of my head, I can go and look back at the backup material, but I don't have the exact justification.
Okay, I was wondering if there was a specific rationale for that, because I know that industry standard is generally half.
Oh, I see. I understand the question. So why is the frequent transit area around the frequent network not half a mile?
Specifically as it related to trains.
To trains. Yeah. Keegan, do you have a response there?
I guess just for my own clarification, which train line are you referring to in this?
Well, I guess my question to you is, which train line are you referring to in your work?
Okay. Yeah, so it's my understanding that and it's possible I have a misunderstanding, but my understanding of the rationale here was that the BRT lines had the half mile due to the elevated projected elevated level of service, and that the quarter mile was chosen for those high frequency proposed routes that are kind of more towards the periphery, shown in orange here, just given the expectation that those specific lines will likely not be at the same headways as the BRT. Am I mistaken in that?
Let's agree to disagree on that, because I believe the definition of a commuter rail train might meet your definition of a train. From a
Well, let me clarify.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the map in front of me here, and I can double check with what is included in the Missing Middle 2.0 text changes, but I'm not seeing any geography related to frequent transit, or excuse me, commuter rail. I mean, it's shown here on the map, but I don't believe that the Missing Middle text changes had specific policy directed around the development of a commuter rail line.
It did not. It did not. I'm noting that you very specifically put trains with a quarter mile buffer, which industry standard is generally not a quarter mile standard. It's just an observation. I didn't know if there was specific rationale behind it. It may in fact be due to when you anticipate the timing of said improvements.
Yeah, again, I think the changes that we're proposing here are related to the bus service and not potential train service. So I'm not understanding perhaps your question.
Perhaps we might need a little bit of clarification on that one. But I'll move on, at least at this point, if there are additional questions or comments from commissioners. Commissioner Bennett, apologies, couldn't see your hand.
I got so thoroughly confused on that last round. Let me pull out my question here. I was like, wait, what do we? This is great. I think it's wonderful. I support it. My question is, I think we've seen this on at least one case that I can think of. My concern is for when these quarter-mile, half-mile areas extend into a community. What's going to be in the UDO or the comp plan to make sure that we don't end up taking actions that are counter to our goals? We're trying to support affordability and minimize displacement. What happens when it extends into a community that maybe has naturally occurring affordable housing, but the incentive is to develop because now it's in this area and you can develop, and you end up seeing luxury apartments or condos that run counter to what we're trying to do?
Yeah, I understand that question and concern. I think what we're planning for and what the regulation and changes are intended to produce is there's very limited control today to prevent a house from being torn down and replaced with a larger house, which is the pattern that we have seen across the city for a very long time. Especially in lower income areas, a small house gets replaced with a big one. That is largely a function of what the existing zoning permits. And by only permitting single family housing, that is incentivizing that to occur. What missing middle housing and these two waves of text changes allow is more options if and when that smaller, naturally occurring affordable house is demolished and replaced. There are very few things that we can legally do to prevent that from happening. What these policies and regulation do is allow them to be replaced with something that would be comparatively less expensive than the one big house. And so that's generally the principle at play here. I think it is unfortunate in a lot of people's minds that we can't prevent those small houses from being torn down and replaced. Those are naturally occurring units in the market today. But what we can do is encourage, if and when that occurs, they are replaced with something that has broader access to more families.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Lehman, did you have a question? No. Commissioner Haber?
Thanks, Chair Fox. A couple things I'd like to follow up on Commissioner Bennett's question, and this might be a larger issue to solve than at this table, but along those lines, I mean, it seems like the solution to that a lot of communities haven't figured out is how we encourage developers to provide affordable housing. And so my question is, I know that part of our current affordable housing plan that was recently passed, there's a bucket of money for the city to purchase property. Is there sort of a process that's going in concert with this and looking at these new transit areas where the city or staff is exploring opportunities for that bucket of money to help with Ms. Bennett's comment? And then my second comment was, and I still don't understand this backup on the response project engagement. It says 11 comments, but I'm only reading 4. But we don't need to talk about that now. It just made me think about the fact that, or I guess not think about the fact, I'm curious how aggressively, knowing that staff is limited with time, getting this map out and getting the word out to the community, because as soon as it's the age-old problem of everybody's like, yeah, this is great, but then as soon as it affects their property, this whole a gallery is full of people saying, hey, hold on, you're tearing down my single-family home. And so I just, to the extent possible, and this is years long again, we're really being aggressive about getting this information out. I'm totally in support of it. It's not going to change my mind if this 37 views goes to 400 views and there's 200 comments versus 11. It's just for future planning commissions, as soon as that thing starts to happen, this place is going to fill up. So just 2 comments.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for the comments, and I will answer the questions too that you had at the beginning. So specific to the existing affordable housing bond, there is a bucket of money that is for investments in bus rapid transit areas specifically. It is not intended, and I don't believe we have the legal authority to spend that money in the frequent transit network. It is just for bus rapid transit. So the New Bern corridor, the corridor along South Wilmington Street, and the corridor along Western Boulevard and north up Capitol. So that bucket of money that exists today is intended to be invested in those areas specifically. The other piece about affordable housing, the text change, Missing Middle 2.0, included a similar density bonus for affordable housing in the areas that you see on the proposed map, a similar housing bonus as is included in the TOD overlay zoning district. So we're using a density bonus in the TOD areas to encourage private development to include rent-controlled units in multi-level housing complexes. That same bonus under the proposed text change and this mapping piece of that text change will encourage the same development around the frequent network. But the frequent network cannot qualify for funding under the existing affordable housing bond.
And that's just the way the current affordable housing bond was written. There's not some state or federal statute that it couldn't.
That's right. That's when you go out for a bond, you specify
Okay.
exactly how the money can be spent. And
Okay.
It was structured with those buckets.
So, and you don't have to rattle back off those corridors, but it does go to note that, again, sort of in conjunction with Ms. Bennett's comments, there's a lot of growth to the north and the northeast, and I think a majority of those corridors were heading that way, and to the south and southeast, it's much smaller. So I don't know if those corridors were included in there, but I think not studying the map, just standing back here at 30,000 feet and being on this planning commission for a little over a year and hearing a lot of what we talk about, seems like there's a lot of opportunity heading north and northeast, and we hear a lot about the needs in the south and southeast. So I could be totally off base on that because I haven't studied the map, but it's just something that jumped out when you mentioned those corridors.
Any additional questions or comments? Seeing none, then I would entertain a motion.
Chair Fox,
uh-huh.
sorry, I've been chatting with my colleagues, and inviting Jason Myers to come and maybe help clarify the questions we had around trains. Sorry to leave that.
That is, I'm sure, very helpful.
Sorry, I was looking at the text and understand your confusion about the mention of trains and frequent transit. My suggestion would be to take out mention of train or bus and just make the language be about the frequency of the service, because that's really what's at play. And theoretically, the city could install a mixed traffic streetcar in lieu of a frequent bus. It's identical from a service standpoint, and I think that should be treated in that way. You know, the commuter train or regional rail service isn't really addressed in that, but it's also not on the map, and those station locations aren't really known yet. So we could address that at a future time.
That would be helpful. Given that information, would you, Matt, be interested in deferring this item to change the language, or is that something that's just
We can incorporate that in your motion.
Okay.
And then change that at the council table. I think staff's perspective at this time would to catch the map up with the rest of the Missing Middle 2.0 text change. because of its applicability specifically in the geography shown in the map.
I'll still be willing to make a motion. You just made it a little bit harder for Chair Fox not to correct me after I throw it out there, but I'll give it a whirl.
Work it.
I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated April 12th, 2022, contained in the agenda materials. I recommend approval of the comprehensive plan amendment with one change under the definition of frequent transit area. I propose that we remove the words between buses or trains and leave it 15 minutes. After considering the policies and maps and other materials included as part of the comprehensive plan, I believe the proposed amendment is consistent with comprehensive plan and request it should be approved.
Well done, thank you. Is there a second? Okay, so I have Commissioner O'Haver offering a motion to approve CP 1521 and Commissioner Dautel offering a second. Is there any additional discussion or debate on the merits of the motion? Nope, seeing none. Those in favor? And any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. And then moving on to the best item, the last item, that would be text change TC 422, flood hazard areas effective date. And I believe Mr. York is going to be discussing this one with us.
Yes. Sorry. And I don't have any pictures or anything, so. During the approval of TC 1620, which you all reviewed and recommended, I believe unanimously for approval, which regulates development in the full 100-year floodplain. Council set the effective date as April 1st, anticipating the maps, the FEMA maps, to be adopted by that time. Their now effective date is going to be July 19th, 2022, instead of April. And so the council back in March revised the effective date of TC 1620 to July 19th, 2022. But in the text of TC 1620, we had about 8 references to April 1st, 2022. So this is a text amendment to amend a text amendment that has not gone into effect, to correct the reference to April 22 and change it to July 19, 2022, which is the effective date of TC 1620, if that makes sense. I'm happy to
Surprisingly,
not
it
answer
does.
your questions. No.
Are there
No.
any questions or comments from commissioners?
Yes.
I have a question. It might be too late for this based on the fact that City Council has already revised the date, but could we just not put a date in there? And just have it dependent on whenever the FEMA maps are available?
Well, we know now that they've been released,
Oh,
is my
okay,
understanding, and they have to be adopted by July 19, 2022.
Okay, understood.
And
Thank you.
so we now know what that date is. We were guessing back in 2021 when this was drafted and approved. Ben Brown promises me that. So happy to answer any questions, but it's basically we consider doing it as a clerical, but we figured we'd go through the process since we had time.
Are there any additional questions or comments? Seeing none, then I would entertain a motion. Commissioner Raines?
Thanks, Chair Fox. For text change TC 4-22, flood hazard areas effective date, I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated April 12, 2022, containing the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning text amendment, as it will align the effective date and the previously adopted ordinance with the effective date of the new FEMA maps.
And do we have a second? Commissioner Bennett? All right. Commissioner Rains has offered a motion to approve TC 422. Commissioner Bennett has offered a second. Is there any additional discussion or debate on the merits of the motion? Seeing none, by show of hands, those in favor? And those opposed? Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Well done. All right, moving on to approval of the minutes. The draft of the March 8th Planning Commission meeting minutes are in the backup. Are there any corrections or edits? Commissioner Bennett?
Thank you. Just one on page 4, second paragraph, last sentence. There was a question asked if the neighbors that are already in the neighborhood will benefit from this project, and if not, there was a belief this is in the public interest. It should be this is not in the public interest. That's all I had.
Excellent. With that correction, would you like to offer a motion to approve?
Sure. I move that we approve the minutes of the March 8th, 2022 Virtual Planning Commission meeting minutes with that one amendment.
Excellent. And is there a second? And Commissioner Lampman? Any additional discussion or debate? No. By show of hands, those in favor of approval of the minutes? And those opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Moving on to other business, report from the chair. And hi, thank you for dealing with our meeting as we get back to being in person. I think we're going to have to deal with some logistical issues as we deal with this. And I deal with the fact that my hearing is going, and you couldn't tell when I was in a virtual world because I would turn certain people up and turn certain people down. So there might be times when I'm straining, and that is why I'm straining. That is my only report.
That's your report.
That is my report. The chair has a hearing impairment. Anyway, report from the members. Any upcoming meetings might be appropriate to report at this time?
No, but there was one thought that I had during some of the discussion today was maybe, I know sometimes we have separate discussions over various topics in the subcommittees, and one I was thinking was perhaps a watershed discussion and impervious surface and that sort of thing. I don't know if, I think it would probably go more under infrastructure, but if anybody else is interested in that same topic and exploring that further, I'd be interested in doing that.
Could it be something we could bring to the committee of the whole so that it's, because I would be interested in that. I'm not on the infrastructure committee.
I think you could report it out after it goes into the, I don't know, anyway, it doesn't matter.
I might recommend it could be appropriate to do it in the context of a specific zoning case, so we could have specific things to point to. And I'm only mentioning that because if you look at our pending items, our very robust list of pending items sort of makes me want to have a minute. So
Are any of those in watershed areas?
Well, you had a couple today
Right,
that you
but they're already-
reviewed. I'm not certain if we have any others that are pending that are in the watershed. We'd have to look at the list.
yeah,
And then just to clarify that anything that goes on in the subcommittees is one recorded and available, but also can be reported
Sure.
out in the committees.
Absolutely.
As how it was, the outcome of that.
yeah, that's great. We did have a great presentation, I believe, as part of the Downtown South. We had a little bit of a primer from Ben Brown, which I thought was really useful. Maybe it's just revisiting that. At this time, though, I think perhaps putting it on the calendar might be a little bit premature unless other members of the commission want to discuss that item post haste.
Premature for the subcommittees too? I thought maybe that might alleviate it, but no.
If we're going to try and start putting zoning cases in the subcommittees,
She's just talking about a primer on requirements for watershed and other things, I think, right? Yeah.
right.
Just gonna go through the requirements.
Yeah, I believe we had one as part of the Downtown South, so it might be worthwhile just revisiting that versus having an additional presentation, unless other members of the commission are interested in having that presentation as a standalone item. Okay, not seeing it. Okay. Any additional report from members? Excellent. And I believe we have Western BRT and Southern BRT on the agenda. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's right. And it's a special date. It's next Thursday. In this room.
21st?
That's right.
Thank you for mentioning that.
So to summarize, special meeting, committee of the whole, April 21st, 4 p.m., council chambers. On the agenda, Z1822 and Western Boulevard, BRT, TOD, and Southern BRT, which is Z1922. Is that? Okay. Any other?
No.
Okay.
No infrastructure and mobility committee meeting scheduled as of yet, but I just wanted to say hello to the people I'm seeing in person for the first time in 2 years. I think Brian and I hadn't seen each other in person ever. I don't think I'd ever seen Matt before, so hi Matt, nice to see you. And so it's just really nice to be in person, so that was all.
All right, and since Commissioner Miller is not here, it looks like our next text change committee meeting is April 19 at 4 p.m. In OEP.
Right, I think it's a space issue.
Okay. In a room to be determined.
It's either going to be on the 8th floor or the 1st, I think.
Yeah, right now we're hoping the ground floor conference room.
Okay.
So logistical, this Mac plug does not fit in here. My computer's going to go to sleep. If I bring an extension cord, where can I keep it in here? That's a serious question.
We could put it in the nameplate box.
Yeah.
Perfect. I will do that. And then I just wanted to point out to everybody Travis's awesome Easter egg tie, if you did not notice it.
Thank you.
That's a strong flex right there.
Excellent. Moving on. Speaking of which, report from the Assistant Director, Mr. Green.
Thank you. You've got a report in the backup that just calendars all of the recent zoning actions from the City Council, so I won't belabor that point. You can read it at your leisure. I would point out that you might have noticed I'm not Kim Bowers. He has accepted a different type of position with the City of Raleigh. So he will be charged with heading up what we're calling our Urban Projects Group, which is a conglomeration of what used to be known as the Urban Design Center, Real Estate Division, and Project Advocacy. So he is furiously putting together a business plan for that unit now, and he'll be shifting his focus to that group. We're really excited about what this group can accomplish. Their main focus is going to be not just looking at the urban realm, which is what the Urban Design Center did, but also focus on public-private partnerships and how to be helpful to the development community in solving very specific issues they might have in development. So I think it's going to be a fantastic opportunity for that group to really grow and show what the city can do. So you'll see myself and Bynum at these meetings moving forward. We'll be steering you through this ship that is known as the Planning Commission meeting. As always, I'll be kind of on the back end providing you with the full support, so that won't change at all. Second thing I would notice or note is that we sent out an email gauging interest for a special meeting of the Planning Commission. There were 2 dates that were identified, this Thursday and then 2 weeks from this Thursday. We couldn't get a consolidated opinion on either of those days, and we don't want to schedule a meeting without having full knowledge that we would have a quorum. So what staff is just suggesting is we'll continue to meet on our regular schedule. You'll just see agendas that look like the one that we saw today, you know, where we have.
Today was very light.
Oh, I'm sorry. Today was very light. I was trying to smooth it over. You're going to see robust agendas moving forward, so let's buckle up and get ready. That's all I got.
Excellent, thanks. Thanks for that. Anything else for the good of the order? No? With that, that concludes our meeting. Thank you.